So the way I weighted these years depended on how many similarities this this particular analog year had with 2015. And so 1940 to 1941 was actually quadruple weighted because it had four noticeable similarities that I could find to this current year. 1957, 1958 was triple weighted. It was the second best analog year I could find because it, as well as 1940, 1941, had three or more similarities to this current situation. So the secondary analogs, I prefer 1986, 1987. It had a Aleutian low that was similarly placed and a strongly positive PDO in addition to a moderate El Nino. So this is another good year, I think, to possibly take a look at. Um, this year, I'm not as thrilled about compared to 1986, 1987. There are a lot of dissimilarities to this year, but I could find that was a strong El Nino, and it had a fairly strongly positive QBO for the winter. So I double weighted it. Not I do favor this year slightly more than 1982, 1983, though. 1987, 1988 was another strongly positive PDO with a positive QBO, which also got double weighted. That was more of a weak to moderate El Nino for the winter, though. So this, again, is my favored secondary analog compared to the other 2 years. My tertiary analogs, I don't really overly like this year. I do like its temperature distribution profile for the tropical Pacific. It's the fact that it had a negative PDO definitely does not make it a good analog for this upcoming winter, and therefore I only gave it a single weight for its temperature distribution anomalies in the tropical Pacific. 1998 had a strong El Nino, and thus I decided to consider it once, although it should be noted that there are a lot of dissimilarities between this year and 1997, 1998. I also weighted 2002, 2003, 2009, 2010 once because of the similar placement in the tropical forcing where the best upward motion is. They had some similarities there, so I did decide to include them in my forecast. So taking a look at the analog composite, you can see all the years right here, and it is a very warm look for December. You can see that we have that +3 right here, +2 right along the coast, and you see basically the entire eastern 2/3 of the country is dealing with very warm temperatures with a lot of precipitation. And this is actually kind of deceptive because even though it could average warmer than normal during December, you could be dealing with a situation where you have enough cold air present with a storm system coming from the south, and you could be dealing with a significant snow event into this portion of the country. And that actually happened even in December 1997, 1982, and in 1957, where those Decembers averaged very warm, but yet we saw a significant snow event as a result of continued southern stream systems. Eventually, one of them hooked up with a colder air mass that came to the north and produced a significant snowstorms for this part of the country. January through March is very different, though, and that's a key message that I think should be taken from this forecast, is that when you take an analog composite of these years, this particular composite shows up, and you can see that it is noticeably colder than December especially, but it also should be taken note of that this is noticeably warmer than January through March last year. January through March last year was very chilly across this portion of the country, and while it could average moderately colder compared to normal, it should average much warmer compared to last year. However, at the same token, it could average snowier as well, and I'll get to that very shortly. Precipitation, a very clear signal for a below average Ohio Valley in terms of precipitation. You can see there is a sneaky storm track though along the east coast here. So this would indicate that we do have a lot of southern stream systems, California getting a lot of rain. And you can see that Florida also as well. But then New Jersey into coastal Massachusetts has this storm track right here. So we definitely will be dealing with a storm track just off the coast, I think, for January through March. And looking at this as a whole, you can see that through December through March, we have the warmest anomalies into the northern Midwest, Chicago averaging warmer than normal, with that warm bubble kind of extending all the way up into Maine, near normal temperatures for Pennsylvania into New Jersey, with a colder south and east. Precipitation below average in the Ohio Valley, that storm track going up the East Coast. But we also have kind of a hint at another storm track kind of coming up into the Great Lakes here, which could be more present in December, which would have less blocking than, say, in February, when more blocking is expected to develop as a result of all the factors mentioned before. So now here's my official forecast. You can see that I am forecasting a very warm December for this portion of the country, and for most of the country as a whole. You can see that we do have very warm temperatures extending all the way east into New Hampshire and Vermont. So it is going to be a very mild December, albeit it might actually not be as mild as last December. Because of how cold January through March were last year, it's often forgotten that December was fairly mild in a large portion of the eastern U.S. And so this might actually average slightly cooler than last December, but still averaging above normal. So here is my January through March forecast. You can see I am still forecasting a warmer Midwest here, but notice the tongue of colder trying to seep into the Northeast here as a result of that expected pattern flip, as a result of all of the factors I've mentioned before. You can see the Southeast is the coldest relative to average, but you can see that we have that. It's a very clear signal of the jet cutting underneath, providing that storm track up the East Coast. And when we look at precipitation, temperature departure overall, you can see that the Midwest solidly warmer than average, but Pennsylvania to New Jersey will remain near normal compared to a cooler Southeast for December through March as a whole. So snowfall, I am expecting that storm track to track up the East Coast for January through March, more of a Great Lakes track into December. So I expect that this part of the country will probably see most of the snow earlier on, as evidenced by the snowfall we just saw into Chicago here. But most of the snowfall here should come in the second half of the winter, when the pattern decides to flip around. And we look at precipitation, I am forecasting below normal precipitation into the Ohio Valley, near normal into the Appalachians, and above normal by the coast, where I do expect that storm track to be present during that second half of the winter especially. So my confidence for December temperatures is very high. January through March is slightly further out, so it's a little lower than it is for December. We are seeing some signs of the polar vortex being disturbed from the Kara-C Ridge, which is actually a direct result from the Snow Advance Index being higher than average, which would result in more stratospheric polar vortex perturbation as opposed to not. You can see that December through March temperatures, though, I am still confident, mediumly confident, that the best anomalies will be centered in the Midwest, with kind of a cool southeast and a near normal look for Pennsylvania into New Jersey. Snowfall confidence is low, however, and that is because of the nature of the storms that we will be getting. It is going to be a lot of bigger but fewer storms. So if we do see one more snowstorm link up with some cold air, then we could see snowfall departures bust in the positive direction. But however, if we see one less snowstorm, then we will see significantly lower snowfall than currently forecast. So you can see snowfall is a very uncertain parameter in this forecast. Precipitation is fairly high, though, as I do expect that storm track to be off the East Coast, and whether the main issue will be whether enough cold air can get into these storms, not necessarily whether we'll have enough precipitation. We will have a very moisture-induced southern subtropical jet stream, and that will lead to a lot of storm chances. But whether that translates into a lot of big snowfalls or a couple big snowfalls is yet to be seen. And this is everything that I have just explained right now. So the active subtropical jet during an El Nino event, it leads to more intense storminess. And this is the point I also mentioned before with the December. You can see that we did have some analog years that showed a very some snow in December actually, and some of those years actually had above normal snow in December, even though it was a very warm December. So that is something to keep in mind when we see a warmer than average December with a stronger El Nino. So the overview is that it will be warm during December. It is much colder relative to December for January through March. This is the most uncertain parameter by far because of everything that I have mentioned before. And precipitation should be above normal on the East Coast with that expected storm track January through March, and below normal into the Ohio Valley. And with that concludes the winter forecast. Thank you for listening.